Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a new session of the Brain Friendly Channel. This is a space that we have created to talk about topics that are related to our brains, how to understand them better, and how to make use of it in the work environment, but also in our personal lives. Today we have an amazing speaker. It's one of the stars of the Make Me a Leader documentary. If you haven't watched it yet, I would invite you to do it. You can find it in YouTube. So our star is Dr. Kaushik Ram. He's based in Sydney, and the topic of today is called Embodied Cognition. I know that some of you may be wondering what is that and why it is relevant to our day-to-day. So we are going to find out. Welcome, Kaushik. Good morning. How are you today?
Amazing, Silvia. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Looking forward to this session because every time I am with you, I learn a lot. And maybe you want to give us a bit of your background so the audience gets to know you a bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So my professional background is in neuroscience, specialized in neuroimaging. The past 3 years up till January 2021, I was working with Sydney University, and we're developing basically an AI infrastructure, and that was to diagnose multiple sclerosis. And we deployed that across, I think, 38 countries and 150 clinics around the world. So it was a fairly large-scale project, and the field of neuroscience and neuroimaging is evolving quite rapidly. So when I started my PhD 6 or maybe 7 years ago, it was all about mapping the human brain, and that was quite fascinating. We were using quite cutting-edge technology back then, which was diffusion tensor imaging and advanced MRI techniques. And so the way we mapped the brain and the networks and the clusters of networks became quite visible after we used these techniques. Now, like we using, I guess, unsupervised data and adding it into machine learning, and then letting the AI decide, what network connections there are. So yeah, the field of neuroscience is evolving quite rapidly, and as of last year, I did switch from working 9 to 5 academically to running my own business, and that for a large part has been focusing on the nervous system and the human body. And so for me, I do like that bridge between brain and body, because I do find that if we are headlocked a lot of the time, we're missing half of our own intelligence. So a large part of my work is actually integrating both the autonomic nervous system and the central nervous system.
That's fascinating, Kaushik. And I imagine you have seen all these changes in neuroscience in the last 7 to 10 years, and how everything has evolved, how people have become extremely interested in understanding our brains, our bodies. And you're not the type of person that only knows about it, but you also practice integrating your body and your brain, because I see you many times doing things in Bondi Beach, working with your body in all sorts of exercises. And so I want the public to know, what is it that you do at Bondi Beach? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, Bondi is actually part of my lifestyle. So when I chose where to live, I was deliberately choosing to build my business, the work I do around a lifestyle, rather than try to retrofit a lifestyle to pre-existing, work-life balance. So this has been a very deliberate creation. And so movement and being outdoors has been a large part of it. And, the fact that we have become so distant to our body means that we really do need to put in additional effort daily to be able to reconnect with that part of ourselves. So for me, to be able to live in Bondi, to catch the sunrise in the morning, to move, to breathe, to meditate, to be so close to nature, is the reason for my own productivity. It doesn't compromise my productivity. It actually allows me to be more productive throughout the day because I have things that are nurturing me throughout the day rather than getting, slammed down by work and then struggling to keep up.
Yeah. That's fair enough. And I wonder what the people are thinking when they do have a 9 to 5 and they can't do all the things you do in the middle of the day. What we haven't even defined embodied cognition yet, but let's talk about this. How does someone that is locked into an office space from 9 to 5 or even more hours access some of these things that you're enjoying today?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a large part of what people might find as resistance from a work culture. If you do take maybe an extra 5 minutes during your tea break, or you spend half an hour outside during your lunch break, sometimes your employer might not find that productive. So it's important to first have a conversation with your employer and actually talk to them about mental health, talk to them about the benefits of nurturing these activities. Because often, if we do take that moment out for ourselves, we are burdened with guilt. And so we have to rush back to our desk. And so that defeats the purpose of,
Yes,
taking a
absolutely.
walk. Or so like it's more encouraging from, higher management that, you do have to take these breaks in order to have a sustainable productivity rather than burnout and short circuiting halfway through the day. So, that's the first point of call. And the second point is knowing how. If you are taking a walk and your walk is a million miles an hour and you rush back to your desk kicking and screaming because like the cars were not allowing you to cross the road, or the traffic light was too long, all of these things are adding more stress into just something that was meant to be a peaceful time. So knowing how to manage your internal state and knowing how that interacts with the world around you is a huge part of taking that break. So yeah, like it is a big cultural change, but in order to get that big picture, you need to focus on the small steps that lead you there.
Yes, you are absolutely right. And one of the things I find is some managers, some leaders have enormous difficulty in letting go of the control, of the need for control, and that they put the blame and the guilt into the minds of people around them. Obviously, with the pandemic, some of these things had to be in massage because now people are allowed to work from home out of necessity. So I think that people have learned in a way that control is not very useful for productivity. And if you trust your employees to do the right thing and you follow up on outcomes rather than on time, it can be, you can have a more productive workforce. Obviously, some roles require face-to-face presence, as we know, so it's not for everybody. But even if you have to be from 9 to 5, getting up and having a cup of coffee, or walking to work rather than taking the bus or things like that, can definitely help in your day to day. So, Kaushik, let's define embodied cognition. What is it?
It's a interesting word, embodied cognition. Sometimes I feel like we need complex explanations to explain that which we already are. And when I think of the word embodied cognition, it just seems like a big word for our natural state, basically. And the fact that we have become so far removed from our natural state means that we need an entire field of science to come and restore that balance. And the balance that I'm talking about is the balance between the autonomic nervous system and the central nervous system. The fact that we observe the brain in isolation and develop, the field of psychology or the field of neuroscience, and we do not take into account the enormous complexities that are governing the body, is a huge, I guess, missing link in our field of science and in the field of medicine. So embodied cognition is actually looking at all of the systems as a unified organism rather than simply the brain or the body in isolation. So it's, I think, slowly coming into acceptance because as scientists, by the time we get to PhD level, we already so, I guess, pigeonholed into a certain area of work that it's hard to even contemplate other areas of science. So in order to really get a full picture of this, it is really important for scientists to open their eyes and work with collaborators to challenge their own perception, challenge their own science, and see that the brain and the body are actually one. They're not two distinct pieces of tissue trying to work against each other, which leads to, for many people, internal conflict, internal dialogue. They don't trust themselves. There's doubt. They go, my mind says this, my heart says that. Why is that?
Yes.
It's because there is a lack of harmony between brain and body. So in order to dissolve that internal conflict, it is really important to understand the mechanism and to know how to find that balance again.
One thing that I noticed when I was producing the documentary, it was the disconnection that exists between the different branches of neuroscience, if you want to call it, with, for example, neurogastroenterology. It's almost like people in the gut space were doing research, not considering the brain, and vice versa. I think that this is changing rapidly, and one of the things I noticed was that when we go to sleep and we go into REM sleep, the gut also seems to go into REM sleep as well. So wouldn't it be interesting to know more about this integration between what the body does and how it impacts the brain and vice versa? What connects the body and the brain?
So the connection of brain and body is inevitable. It's part of the entire organism. But I guess what causes the interaction is nerve cells. And it's important to note that in the brain, nerve cells are a minority. Even our picture of the brain is a little bit flawed if you do not understand the schematics of neuroscience. Nerve cells actually comprise 15% of the brain, and the rest is ganglia cells and cerebrospinal fluid, and there's so many interactions happening just within the brain. As I said, when I was doing the PhD research, just looking at network level understanding is actually a very small picture of the brain. So when you add to the mix the body itself, we're looking at it from a neurological perspective. And what connects the brain and body is the spinal cord. And the spinal cord receives all this information from the body and sends these signals to the brain. And then it gets feedback from the brain, and that's how that interaction works. What is becoming more apparent now is when we study the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve descending from the brainstem into the body. So the dorsal side goes into the heart and lungs. So the dorsal is the back, and the ventral, which is our front-facing side, that goes into all the other organ systems. And what is becoming more apparent is that the dorsal side is more related to the sympathetic activation. So fight or flight, you know, that when you see a cat kind of go on its paws, it's the dorsal bend that happens. It's a, you know, anger response. The ventral side, which is our chest, where the heart is, you know, mostly perceived, that is related to social cognition, bonding, openness, trust. And this is the ventral vagal theory. And so now, you know, when you are rubbing a dog on the belly, or rubbing a cat on the belly, that's, you know, that openness that, you know, is there across our entire animal lineage. It's not just human. So this is where all of this, I guess, relationship between brain and body is derived from. I personally do look at neuroscience from an evolutionary perspective. My previous, I guess, education has been in evolutionary biology and animal behavior. So I draw from that and then use a lot of the latest in neuroscience to actually comprehend, you know, why our brain has evolved the way it has. So yeah, it's a very I guess a complex question to get a grip around.
Thank you for that, Kaushik. And I have a question from Ricardo about two questions. One of them is how many breaks should we have during the day, which you can answer in a second. And the other one is how do I incorporate embodied cognition in my daily leadership? And I was just listening to you, and I want to answer to Ricardo. Do not go around rubbing people's bellies, which could lead to more trust in the workspace, but probably that wouldn't be appropriate, even though it would be really nice. You do it with your kids, for example. So how can you respond to these two questions? How many breaks per day, and how do we incorporate this notion of embodied cognition into our day-to-day leadership?
Yeah, so with the first question, how many breaks should we have in a day? It actually really depends on your own neuropsychology. What we have thought of with the brain as a ideal brain doesn't exist. So what we classed previously as mental disorders is now being framed as neurodiversity. And, you know, say autism or dyslexia, or, you know, like we could look at these as conditions that we need to treat, or we could look at that as a different brain organization that requires a different set of needs. And so how many breaks you take is really dependent on your neural organization. So for me personally, I do like a extended period where in the morning I do things for myself. That boosts my confidence. That gives me energy for the rest of the day. I spend time eating healthy, so I have sustained energy throughout the day. And then when I do pay attention to what I have to do, I actually go on for hours because I'm hyper focused on what I need to do. And then because I've got a lot of work done in a small chunk of time, then I spend another additional time having, you know, an extended period of break, which then kind of refuels that ideas, those creativity, which I rely on for my work. So that's how I personally have organized my day. I get, you know, a lot of the, I guess, heavy lifting of the work done in the morning. And then in the afternoons, I do spend a lot of time just in creativity. It might look like I'm doing nothing, but that is where majority of my work gets done. And this is basically based on my own experience and my lived experience of what allows me to work at my best. So for anyone, I would ask them to first experiment what works for them, because a lot of people might not have the luxuries that I do with my time. So even those constraints provide opportunities to test out what works in, a high pressure scenario, what works when you are managing a team and you don't have the luxury to just walk out and, like you've got 5 meetings planned throughout the day. So how do you manage your time in those sense? Can you take, like a meeting outdoors? Can you rearrange your schedule so that they're not cluttered? Instead, you have decent amount of break time in between meetings. So these are things that are down to personal responsibility. And there is no fixed or right answer to this. You really have to experiment and see, based on your own situation, what you can do for yourself. And to answer the second question, how to include embodied cognition in your leadership training, I think this is paramount. Embodied cognition means being in touch with your own body, and there's an enormous amount of, I guess, brain resources invested in what we call introception, which is the ability to sense your internal state. If this wasn't, something that we should take seriously, why would, there'd be neural networks invested in monitoring our internal state? Why would there be a vagus nerve sending 80% of the information from the body into the brain rather than the other way around? Why would there be the insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, the posterior parietal lobe dedicated to monitoring our internal state? I mean, these brain resources can be allocated to other things, but instead, there are clusters of networks that are dedicated for our internal state. And basically, to just put this in a work context, if you are at your desk and you are a manager leading, say, a team of 20, and one of your employees is not integrating with the rest of the team, and they come into your office after a couple of weeks and shares their problems, and if you're too busy or too run down or burnt out just trying to manage your team, you do not have the capacity to actually address the problem. You might provide them with a quick fix, or defer that problem to talk to them about it at a later time. And by that time, more resentment builds up, and there's more internal dynamics that is actually affecting the productivity of the team. So if you are able to monitor your internal state and someone walks through your door, you have so much more capacity to actually look at them and see them and go, wow, okay, I see, your struggles. And here are the steps that we can take to alleviate that. So this is the ventral vagal concept that I've been talking about, that openness, that trust, that ability to relate. And if you're not able to do that, maybe there are resources that you can look at to improve that leadership training, because I don't think leadership can exist without it.
Thank you, Kaushik. And I have a question from Sue. We have a question from Sue. She's asking, has there been any research about the effect of the virtual digital working environment on the need for this unified balance between the CNS and the ANS?
Effect of virtual and digital working environments. Yes, so this is a really big issue that we as a species are facing right now. Just think about it, anyone listening, if you can't find your phone, we do face an abandonment issue. And, we can laugh about it, but think of a child not being able to find their parents in a park, and they feel that sense of abandonment. If we are feeling that same sense of abandonment with our phone, something is seriously wrong. And this is how much we have, become distant to our own needs, our own values, that we rely on something that, cannot love us back
No.
for that. Say like, yes, the digital and virtual world has enormously affected our nervous system. And we should take this very, very seriously. The kids coming out of school today, the 15, 16-year-olds who are just entering the first job, now they are coming from a TikTok environment. These are the kids who in the next 10 years will be fulfilling corporate roles. Now, if their brain is so agitated and scattered because they're watching reels all the time, and for this reason, I'm not on TikTok. I deliberately choose not to look at any reels on Instagram, and it's simply because those videos are so short that there is no end point to it. It just keeps going. Like, how many times has context shifted within a space of 1 minute? And so there's no sort of time to absorb or find an end to a story. If you watch a movie, for example, after an hour and a half or 2 hours, you go, wow, like that had a beginning, that had a middle, that had a conclusion. And you go, okay, I have come to a sense of conclusion to that story. And you might contemplate it or you might let it go. With short form content, which is designed for our hyperactive brains, so instead of teaching kids to have longer attention spans, we're actually playing to their short attention spans. So this is training the brain and using reinforcement learning that this is the type of content that is trendy. This is the type of content that we should be consuming. Now, the effect on the brain is that we're now faced with childhood dementia. So the onset of dementia used to be around, like over 65. And the symptoms may present itself and the person may become, they might start facing disability, or it may become debilitating around the age of 80, 85. Now, if kids are facing childhood dementia at, the onset is around 2022, how are these kids going to operate in a workforce? And so this is not a problem that, we can sort of cast a blind eye on. This is the workforce of the future. And if we are providing, an AI workforce to replace the human workforce, what are we going to do with these kids? So, these are important questions we should be asking as a human species, because these are not trivial issues.
Absolutely not. I find quite daunting to see the disconnection that exists between people nowadays, and or parents and children. And most parents are not aware of the things you are talking about. And just because technology or this technology exists, it doesn't mean we should be using it, or we should be using it all the time. So we are creating a generation of addicted people, and it's difficult to revert, because you and I have different parameters. We have been in an era where TikTok didn't exist, so we kind of notice what can affect us. But people that are growing in this generation, they don't have a comparative point, so it's kind of a difficult thing to resolve, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess, with the aging workforce, it does make our intelligence far more valuable, because we did exist prior to the internet. the internet was invented on the same year I was born, and it sort of gained popularity with the launch of Windows or 95, or that era when the internet was available as a dial-up throughout everyone's homes. And to educate these kids, we kind of have to gather them around the Snapchat or whatever they are tuned into at the moment. And to me, it's such a contradiction to provide education through digital media on how to be without it. Maybe the re-education has to be taking kids outside their comfort, leaving the phone at home and going away for the weekend.
Yes.
Maybe it's teaching them, where food comes from, and putting their hands in the soil, and observing what critters are in the dirt. These are things that we as kids had available to us. And there's been enormous shift in, I guess, the post-World War II era. If you think about, when our parents were born, they were born post-World War II for majority of the working class. And at that point, when after the World War, people decided to return back to work, there had been an enormous technological revolution. And so now there was a migration towards urban areas. And so instead of family units working with each other, you had maybe the dad going out and working 9 to 5, and the kids were stripped of the wealth of information from half of their parents. Like they didn't have dads around. And so the boys, I guess, lost touch with their fathers, and a lot of how, the healthy leadership qualities that allow men to be good leaders were stripped for them. And the same goes with women returning to work. And, a lot of the healthy feminine qualities were stripped from them when they tried to participate in a masculine, paradigm or environment where they're supposed to sort of hustle and push. And, are you supposed to do that? We've, as a culture, have transformed so far from what is meant to be human that we've lost touch with, very basic qualities. And that's why we are so easily replaceable by, AI, because we are basically doing repetitive, mundane work, which, the education system has designed us for. The education system is basically a manufacturing plant for HR. And when we recruit, we are recruiting based on whether someone's a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. These are manufactured roles. And so we're subscribing to, the manufacturing form of, existence. And, these are really hard problems to solve because we have attached our identities to it.
Yeah.
If someone, for example, is looking at the stock market and they've invested in something that is crashing, and they think they can will it to change, how, like the stock market itself, it's not going to happen. And the same goes with our careers. If we are working in dying careers, we can't simply will it to change. The society is moving in a completely different way. So what are the very human characteristics that allow us to remain relevant? And I think it's not competing with AI or digital workforce. It is returning to what we already are. And this is where embodied cognition comes in, because these are the very traits, creativity, empathy, leadership, that will allow people to be relevant in the not so distant future.
Thank you for that, Kaushik. And we have a couple of other questions. Justin is asking us if anyone is doing some research around the vagal dorsal link, heart-lung, and the role of the pineal gland. Not sure if you can answer that.
Yeah, so there probably is. I haven't really looked into it yet, but it does make sense because the pineal gland is largely responsible for our circadian rhythm. And this is something that I do care about a lot, because our circadian rhythm defines our energy levels throughout the day. It governs, when we go to bed. And these very basic parameters, if you are working within the rhythms of those parameters, you are already connected to your internal state. And if you look at the workforce, we might not have had a good night's sleep. So we wake up exhausted. So we take the first cup of coffee because that's just habit. By the time we reach work, we take the second cup of coffee. And, like the circadian rhythm is way off. And we're pushing through the day. And then around 2 or 3, we take another cup of coffee just to end the day. Mm-hmm. And by the time we get home, like, internally, the rhythm is way off. We really, worked up and we can't switch off. So we stay up till like 3 a.m. researching something that has very little relevance to, what we actually should be paying attention to, which is sleep. And so we repeat the cycle. And so, in my own personal life, especially the last 2 years when COVID hit and people were working from home, I made a deliberate effort to remove all the light bulbs from my house. And, it was a great invention, Thomas Edison's light bulb. But now I have, a salt lamp and some candles and a lamp that doesn't emit light over 32 Kelvin. So that means the moment the sun goes down, there is no light that is stimulating me. So by the time I, go to bed, I fall into deep sleep quite effortlessly because, I'm not stimulated to the point where I can't, I've kind of gone past that sleep stage, and now I'm sort of in a awake state trying to go to bed. So these are very simple things. Like, these are not big changes.
No.
But, when we talk about how connected you are to your body, if you are truly connected, you are working with the natural rhythms of nature.
Yes.
And, our biological rhythms, like, what the pineal gland is modulating is with the rhythms of nature. So if you're not working with it, you're working against it. And this is where, this is a source of exhaustion, burnout, mental illnesses, and, all that comes with it.
And this kind of was the answer for Jeff, who is saying, I found the sleep has helped repair my neural pathways. Tell me more about the sleeping tips. So, you have shared some of them. Anything else for Jeff?
Yeah, so sleep is really, really important. One of the things that happens, and perhaps, a lot of people brush this off, but when you do sleep, it allows the brain to actually rest and repair. And in a way, like, sleep pre-exists the evolution of the brain. Why does the brain exist? It exists because somewhere in evolution, nerve cells got myelinated. And the moment nerve cells got myelinated, we're able to send information across long distances. This is how, dinosaurs became so big, because, the nerve signal from the tip of the head of long-necked dinosaurs could reach the tail. It wouldn't have been possible if there was no myelination.
Yeah.
So that kind of led to a centralized brain. And a centralized brain is far more efficient than a neural net, which, some invertebrates have, like jellyfish. They don't have a single brain. They have a nerve net. But the interesting thing is jellyfish still sleep. So the evolution of sleep predates the evolution of a centralized brain. So why is it so important? I don't actually have an answer to that. I just know that it is very, very important. And I monitor my sleep. For example, I have this Aura ring, which provides me with amazing with sleep insights. And Silvia, you probably know how valuable those insights are. How much deep sleep you have, how much REM you have, and you probably already know that if you're struggling through the day and if you just look at your sleep score, it shows a direct correlation. And the days that you're actually pulsing with energy, you look at your sleep score and you're like, wow, like, because I had a good night's sleep, because I went to bed at the right time, I am able to be far more productive during the day. So yeah, like I do. I mean, you do have other wearable devices, Apple Watch and things like that, that will allow you to track your sleep. I think this is very, very important, and it's actually one of the ways of stepping out of that digital world. One of the reasons I chose Aura Ring is because there's nothing blinking, or in this, there's no like haptic feedback, anything like that. It's just a normal piece of jewelry that does not give me any notifications unless I choose to check it. So, and I only check it once a day. And this is the type of technology that is really, really useful, because if it's integrated with the workforce, for example, you might have a work from home environment where an email comes in from one of your clients or stakeholders, and you have the temptation to reply to it, but then you get a notification from one of the wearable devices that, hey, if you start answering this email now, it will compromise your sleep. Maybe you can leave it till the morning. So there is no technology right now that integrates with the entire ecosystem of your work-life balance. But this is something that gives me hope for the future, that we will use biometric data to optimize our daily work.
Yes, and like you, that my ring really helps me embed the good habits. I have heard some people say that, if they notice they're not sleeping well, they get more anxious. To me, it's the other way around. If I'm not sleeping well, I make sure that the night that follows, I do the rituals that I perhaps should have done the night before, particularly if they are not interactive. And one of the things that I have done for me is, like, I don't have any ringtone, any notification in my phone. I actually look at my phone from time to time to see if I have calls, and only people that I really want them to interrupt my day, I have a special call that bypasses, a special ring that bypasses. But I try to minimize the distraction, because I always say it's not so much about time management, it's more about mind management, how you manage your mind, exactly what you were saying before, in order to succeed, thrive, and do what you need to do on a daily basis. One of the comments by Justin, thank you guys for contributing. That's awesome. This is awesome. Hello, Justin. Hello, Jeff and Ricardo. Justin says, walking on the beach in the white water, in the bush, or in the grass without shoes will also help with connection and sleep. And that is so true. And it reminds me of your experience in Thailand a few years ago, and how you were able to tune into nature by living in a cave. That's an amazing experience that you have had. And the thing that I recall the most of your experience was when you arrived in the cave the first day, and all the monkeys and every other animal disappear from your sight. And after, I don't know, you said maybe 15 days or 3 weeks one day you were setting up the fire and suddenly you saw a waterfall of leaves being falling on your fire, and you look up and it was a group of monkeys looking at you and perhaps helping you with the with the fire. Can you tell me about that, and how do you think you achieved that?
Yeah, that is a remarkable question, because when I first entered this cave, I did come with a city mentality. Um, one of the things that's really important to me is fitness. So when I got to the cave, I tried to hang up gymnastic rings, because that is something that I use as a daily movement practice. And no matter what I did to hang these rings, it just did not work, and I usually ended up hurting myself. And after a week of trying to do this, I stopped. I was like, why am I unable to put these rings up? And that's when I actually just surrendered and actually stopped attempting to do that. And when I did, I think I finally got a sense of the natural rhythm of the land, which wasn't pushing yourself, which wasn't working out for the sake of, physical fitness and aesthetics and anything like that. And that's when I started to tap into this natural rhythm. And it did change, my sleeping patterns. I used to light fire every night, not to stay warm, but just to cook food. So collecting wood was part of just something I would do quite naturally. If I'm taking a walk, I'd return back to the cave with, a pile of wood in my hands. And it was quite interesting to have this heightened awareness when you're running through forest and you see a decent piece of wood. It actually shows you, okay, wow, like this will be something amazing to put in the fire tonight. And that allowed me to cook food at night. And what I realized was that the firewood burn throughout the night, but around 2 a.m. I would spontaneously wake up, and I'd naturally put another log in the fire, and then I'll go to sleep again. And there are two things that happened. One was at 2 a.m. I naturally woke up because for some odd reason I was getting flooded by ideas, and at 2 a.m. I'd actually take some of those ideas, write them down, and then I'll put another log in the fire and go back to sleep again. And this is the natural, if you look at the sleep-wake cycle, and you can monitor this in the Aura Ring, is that around that time you naturally wake up anyway. But because we're conditioned to sleep throughout the night, we actually push through and sleep on. And some of us do not even know that we are sort of slightly awake at that time. And so that was one thing. And because there's no lighting in the cave, for about 3-4 months, the only light I had was fire at night. So these changes in my own circadian rhythm is things that I've maintained when I've returned back to the city. And the pace with which I walked in nature when I was living in the cave, it was a deliberate, slow-paced walk. And I wasn't walking slowly because I was in some form of meditative practice. No, I was walking slowly because if you walk fast, you might hurt your foot. For about 8 months, I was completely barefoot. And so you have to pay attention to where you place your foot. I had city feet. And so walking at the rhythm of the land allowed me to harness this connection with nature. And then when I was perceptive to nature, nature became more perceptive to me. And that's when, I could see the monkeys, I could see the cobras, I could see so much more in nature because I wasn't a city boy rushing through nature. I was a man who was in tune with the environment that was around me. And so even when I have, I've returned back to see that was 5 years ago, I still don't walk fast. I still maintain, lighting in my rooms, which is not, over 32 Kelvin, because that goes above, the light emitted by fire. So these processes are things that, initially came to me when I was living in a cave, and I've chosen to maintain that rhythm.
As I listen to you, it reminds me, sometimes I tell my clients in the corporate environment, if you find yourself walking super fast between meetings, there's something going on. Because the fast walking leads to anxiety and the urge to get to the next meeting, particularly if you're late. And, we have businesses try to produce money. That's what businesses are created for. But the body ideally wants to achieve a state of homeostasis, which is a state of equilibrium. So these are opposing needs. So we are a bunch of people working in a corporate environment trying to satisfy the needs of the business or the leaders or the managers. And or sometimes you are the leader and you set up the same pace for people who work for you. How do we reconcile these two opposing notions in our brains, Kaushik, for the future? Because obviously not everybody can go and live in a cave for a few months. I encourage people, if you can do it, go, because you will have an amazing experience. But if you can't, how do we incorporate all the experiences into the day-to-day?
Yeah, this is, again, a very, very important question. And it starts with, one of the most simplest things that we have available to us, which is our breath. And, the moment we tune into that, that is, like a highway into our own internal state. If our breathing is rapid, if our breathing is shallow, obviously that is mimicking a state which is anxious, insecure, hyperactive, and the moment we're able to deepen our breath and stay present with our internal state, it might be that we're uncomfortable. Maybe it's because there's workplace bullying happening, and that elevates your breathing, that elevates your heart rate. Imagine spending 8 hours a day sitting at a desk with someone who's threatening and bullying you. So in those moments, if you're able to regulate your breathing, now you're able to sense this sense of safety even in a threatening environment. So this is one of the things that I teach in my courses, is how to calm the nervous system under a state of threat. Because in meditation, you have an ideal environment. You have candlelit rooms and sense sticks, and there is no sense of threat there. But reality is never like that. Reality is chaos. Reality is full of surprises and unpredictability. And if you do not prepare the body for that, then you'll always be left, on the back foot, trying to catch up. And this is where, if you extend that to a business sense, is that how you want to run your business? Or is that how you want to run your organization? So it starts with the breath, and that allows you to be more perceptive of your internal state, which is what we are referring to here as embodied cognition. And this, I guess, is a way of auto-scaling your internal state, because you are now more deliberate in what meetings you go to. You are now more deliberate in who do you spend more time with. And so once you start managing your state, you also start managing your behaviors. And that is the starting point of, that shift that starts to happen. Because I've been in, work environments, and I've led teams. With my last job with the University of Sydney, I was managing teams across 4 different countries, and we're deploying this AI infrastructure, globally. And so, in order to manage my own team, I wasn't rushing around. I was there for my team when they needed me, and also teaching them to take responsibility for themselves. That's the relationship that, as a leader, you have to nurture so that you're not required. And so, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was scrambling to keep up with my own work, and on top of that, trying to lead a team. And, I'm not perceptive of my own energy. And this is something that is quite relevant, especially in order to lead a team. If the team is not responding to you, you might start using covert ways of leading them, like anxiety. How many policies and how many management decisions are made out of anxiety, which is like, I'm anxious, so I must be right. And, you can't use your anxiety as a way to push people into agreeing with you, or to, meet the deadline or things like that. How many businesses are operating like that? So this is very poor leadership, and it doesn't create a healthy relationship with your employees, let alone yourself. So
I think that to your point, Kaushik, people create policies to cover themselves just in case something goes wrong, because they don't have the capacity or the confidence in themselves to have the hard conversations with people. And people are not aware most of the time of themselves, or they don't know how to manage themselves. So the creation of policies, rules, and procedures, it has invaded us to protect ourselves out of fear rather than out of leadership. And this is, an endemic issue that most organizations have, unfortunately. So we have run out of time, Kaushik, and I just want to give you the opportunity to explain to people how do they learn more from you, because this topic is so broad and so interesting, and you handle it so well. What can people do to learn more from you?
Yeah, so it's wonderful because as I've now switched to full-time teaching this as a program, I do have online courses that people can access from my website, drkaushikram.com. I also have a book, or a couple of books now. The Hidden World is the book I wrote while living in the cave. So that is a way to access this information through a narrative, because not everyone wants to learn about the science. So it's far more accessible to read it in a way that is a little bit more relatable, a little bit more easy to connect to. So the book is there. I also run workshops, and now all of it is done online. So the workshops are both for the individual or for corporations as well. So what I've developed is something that I call the Pre-Cognition Method. And when I talk about precognition, it's not some premonition that you have about the future. It is the cognition of the nervous system of the body. It's what we've been talking about, the body leading before the mind does. So this is pre-cognition. And how do you do that is what we explore in these workshops and courses. So all of this information is available on my website. And I also have a YouTube channel. So beginning of last year, I started putting my videos online, and what I realized was it was gaining a lot of traction when I did speak about the neuroscience and made it very, translated it into easily accessible information. Because one of my greatest pain is that all this information is locked up in journals and literature, which is never read by anyone outside the institute. And so what value does that knowledge have? And so this is, the what I'm doing with my YouTube channel is actually translating that knowledge so that it's available for anyone.
Thank you, Kaushik. It's absolutely imperative that we assist people in demystifying science and making it more available for the day-to-day. It has been an enormous pleasure to see you again and talk with you. We may have to find another time to keep talking about this in a new channel. But thank you so much for your contribution and you do amazing things, and I know you inspire many people with your work and with who you are. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed it today. I'll see you next time. Thank you, Kaushik.
Yes, thank you so much, Silvia, and wonderful to get this opportunity to share.
Thank you. Goodbye now.